I don't care who does it as long as it happens.
You are live.
All right, so we will call the March 4th Signal Mountain Planning Commission meeting to order, and we have to take a roll call attendance, being that we are still virtual. I think I normally force that on someone else, but I can do it just like.
Generally, that's done by the secretary, and I don't believe he's with us today.
All right, who's the vice president?
That's me.
Chairman. Yeah, you want to do it, Eddie?
For notes?
No, you want to call who's here?
Well, somebody needs to take notes too.
I'll take notes.
Okay. All right, I'll start with myself. Eddie Smith, present. Jamie, you're taking notes, correct?
I am.
Jason Farmer, absent. Ethan Nelson, absent. Jamie Blanton,
Here.
Charlie Paws,
Here.
Ryan Slattery. Ron, your volume's off, but I saw you move, so we'll take that as a here.
Present, here.
Thank you. And Ryan's driving, so do not stare at the screen, big boy. Mike Richards.
Here.
I'm a passenger.
All right, that a boy. Marcia Cooper.
Present.
Susanna Murdoch. And I think she's absent. I think that's everyone. Is that a full roll call?
Yeah, it should be. That's 9. You called 9.
Yeah, so we by far have the excess of 5 for a quorum
Yeah. 1, 2,
in the event that we had to do something.
5, 6. All right. I spelled all of those absence as absent.
Did you say like absent the drink?
Yeah, like the
He's already finished.
questionably psychedelic. Yeah.
Have we also taken a minute to recognize Signal Mountain's new mayor, Charlie Paws?
I think we gave him props at some point, but
I think I was late to the meeting last time, but to have one of our own in there, God bless the boy, but we're happy for him.
it seems appropriate for you to give him some more thumbs up if you like to, Eddie. Take a moment.
I just did. He's one of the good ones, and he's going to serve the town extremely well, and he actually has a balanced sense to him. So I think as an organization, we're pretty lucky.
Thank you, Eddie. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And from what point of experience are you saying that that's likely going to be the case?
I'm not asking him for anything, so I feel really good about it that I get to work with him.
There you go.
Yeah, there are worse landrum options out there, aren't there?
Oh dear. And Farmer texted me and he's not going to be able to make it. He's tied up.
Okay, no worries. Got that. Eddie, props to Charlie. Notes taken. All right, so we will dive straight off into the agenda item is election of officers. And I don't remember how Cheryl did that, but just some kind of navigation. So starting off, so I guess we just fire off with a motion for each of the positions.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to have you continue on as the chairman, Jamie, if you're interested.
If you're interested.
I mean, we're all stuck doing this. Is anyone else interested? I want to make sure that there's an opportunity for anyone else who wants it.
I'll second that motion for Jamie Blanton to retain as chairman.
No discussion. Is there anyone else who wants to make another motion first?
No.
Lord have mercy. All right. Vote then.
I'll call it out. Eddie Smith, aye. Charlie Paws?
Yes.
Ryan Slattery?
Yes.
Mike Richards?
Aye.
Marcia Cooper?
Yes.
And I'm not certain on this. Boyd, is anyone from the town on staff supposed to cast vote? I don't think so, but I just want to confirm.
No, it'd just be Charlie and Susanna as the council representatives, but no staff members.
Okay, perfect. I think that is a unanimous confirmation for Mr. Blanton. So congratulations.
All right. Well, does that mean that I can move for Eddie Smith to be the vice chairman then?
Sure. I'll second that. Unless-
Fine. It's honored. Shall I call roll call on myself?
Is there any discussion? I feel like we kind of go sort of hot and fast. Anybody? Oh, I didn't mean to like bounce out there and ignore our two new people. Maybe that was a little rash of me. Marcy, Ryan, do y'all have any great objection to?
Absolutely
Wait a minute
not. Still,
Okay.
still filling it out after a second meeting here, so.
Okay. Well, I will give you every opportunity to hold this
Any other?
office if you like.
Understood.
All right, then. Well, we have a motion and a second. We want to take a vote.
All right, I'll call it off and I will abstain. Jamie Blanton,
Aye.
Mr. Poss,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. Richards,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes.
thank you.
All right. The fun part. Do we peg the notes back on Ethan again, or do we give that to somebody else?
Let's ask the question in all seriousness because Ethan is extremely good as the
Okay.
secretary.
Sorry, I got to step away for just a moment. I'll be right back. Okay.
Sure. He's very effective, and this is for certainly Mike, Marcy, and Ryan. Do you have any interest in it? Would you like to replace him? Or would you like to see him can provide a little bit of continuity and stay in that role?
I think
I think he's doing a
continuity is
beautiful
good.
job.
So I'll make a motion that we retain Ethan Nelson as continued secretary of the Planning Commission. Is there a second?
Second.
Mike Richards seconds. We'll wait on Mr. Poss to return for a vote. Actually, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 voting, Mr. Chairman, that could provide a quorum on that. May I?
Yes, please proceed.
Jamie Blanton? Eddie Smith?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Jamie. Mr. Poss, we have a motion and a second to retain Ethan as our secretary. Would you like to support that motion with a yay or nay?
Sure, I'll vote yes.
Perfect, thank you. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Marcy?
Yes.
Perfect. We have a unanimous confirmation that Ethan retained.
Status quo, man. It's going to be our downfall.
Continuity.
There we go.
I like that word.
Yeah, here we go. All right. Approval of minutes is our second agenda item. Did anyone have a chance to read both November and January's meeting minutes?
Yes.
Are there any comments or revisions necessary?
I don't think so.
I didn't attend the first of the 2 meeting minutes, so I'd abstain from voting on that one.
Yeah, I was. We had like 4 new members on another commission downtown, and we had to do some minutes, and they all voted aye. Approve the minutes. I'm like, y'all weren't even here. That's fine. It's always good to have that positive reinforcement. All right, so we can take a vote on the approval of minutes, right? Everybody good?
Motion to approve.
Second,
Who seconded?
I did. Ryan Slater.
Okay,
Do you need an all in favor vote, Mr. Chairman?
sure, that sounds fine.
So we'll take a quick roll call. Eddie Smith, all in favor, aye. Charlie Poss,
Yes.
Ryan Slattery,
Yes.
Mike Richards,
Yes.
Marsh Cooper,
Yes.
and Jamie, did I call on you?
I gave a gesture, which I think ought to be appropriate if we're not in duress over Zoom.
I don't think we're in duress, so motion's approved.
All right, we are actually making time. Garrett, zoning ordinance amendment, Article 3 definitions. Did everyone have a chance to review
Mhm.
BZA meeting and understand the premise by which we were asked to consider the definition?
Yes.
Yes. So, sorry, go ahead.
I think we have, just for y'all's information, I think we have some people in the waiting room that were prior planning commission members
Yes.
present at the time the language was written or the revision was made. So if there's any information we need from them, they can participate in discussion.
I have a comment as well, if y'all don't mind.
No, please.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll let y'all know if you haven't watched the BZA meeting or just want to know why this is an issue for me, or why I brought it up. The BZA asked us to bring it up before the town council, which it obviously has to come here first. But an issue arose with a lot that was being developed on Palisades, I think. And the homeowner went through a process with the BZA to get a variance and was denied. And after that, they came before the town manager under, I'm going to get the section wrong, 6030202, I think it was.
Yep.
And asked that the town manager grant, I'll call it a variance. I'm not sure it would really technically be called a variance, but for the town manager to decide what the lot setback should be. And there was some concern about this from the BZA, that the process should have gone through the appeals process through the BZA. What it really kind of raised for me is an issue about how this language should be interpreted. And I spoke with Boyd and Harry, and I just felt like I had a different interpretation of this language. I was on the planning commission when the language was put in place, and we invited two people who also were Missy Cantrell and Annette Allen, just to give their thoughts about it, what their interpretation was. But if you look at the language in 6030202, it talks about the lot setbacks for conservation lots and regular lots and minor subdivisions. And then it has an asterisk where it says, I should pull it up. Hang on, I'm going to pull it up.
Yeah, it's good to see it the way it's formatted. That helps fill in what the definitions for lots that wouldn't be that might have been suggested to be at the time.
Yeah, it's talking about setbacks, or actually it's 6030202 is talking about how to determine the maximum number of lots in a subdivision, because the maximum number of lots is going to be different with conservation subdivisions versus conventional subdivisions. So there's a chart, and it says it has the setbacks, and then it talks about the minimum lot size and the maximum lot coverage and things like that. So it's got conservation, conventional, and minor subdivision. Next to minor subdivision is a double asterisk, where if you go down and read it, it says for minor subdivisions being developed within an existing subdivision, the developer shall use the most frequently occurring front setback on the street. Next sentence, the same shall apply for a single infill lot. My reading of that is that the goal here is to ensure that I'll take Carriage Hill, for example, which is a subdivision that we have. If there was a minor subdivision built within Carriage Hill, off, some side street was developed, then you would want the setbacks to be consistent with the setbacks that were in existence when Carriage Hill was developed. If, for example, there was a lot in Carriage Hill that never got developed, say Jamie owned 2 lots. He had a house on one and the other one was just wooded.
Yeah, there's several.
Yeah, and so he decides to sell it and somebody wants to develop it. This provision, I think that where we talk about infill lot is intending to say that that infill lot has to be the same basically as what's going on in Carriage Hill. I don't think that that sentence was put in there to apply to any infill lot anywhere in Signal Mountain. For example, Palisades or James Boulevard, which aren't really in subdivisions like you would consider a subdivision. So I don't think that that provision was designed for that. My interpretation is that that is intended to mean the same shall apply for a single infill lot within a subdivision. And I think that we've got definitions there, which are great, but I think what really the intent was is to modify this language so that it says the same shall apply for a single infill lot within a subdivision. So that we aren't looking at this saying that any lot that hasn't been developed anywhere in Signal Mountain, the landowner must go to the town manager and have the town manager look at every lot on that street and figure out what the most frequently occurring setback is. I don't think that was the intent. So Annette and Missy are here to talk about it, but that's what I wanted to talk about, not so much.
So, but you agree, Charlie, this is Eddie, I'm sorry, but you agree, I think the intent was so that there's some type of reasonable alignment, whether you're inside a subdivision or on a 3-mile road, as was referenced in the meeting, that if the average is 40 feet and that house is going to sit there at 41 or 39, that staff could make that decision versus if it comes out of I know that I'm crossing 2 lines here, but I know that the BZA gave, I didn't understand why the BZA truthfully denied it to begin with. But I didn't watch that meeting to understand that piece. I just watched the meeting to understand this article, but I wanted to get your take on.
Yeah.
You don't want to go down to Palisades and the average house is sitting 40 feet off the road, and then somebody wants to build something 20 feet off the road, and that's granted approval because that's going to look extraordinarily odd.
No, this really has nothing to do with the BZA's decision or the
You're saying whether it's infield or whether it's subdivision, it's all going to be, there's going to be some commonality. Is that right?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, okay, let's take 2 lots, okay? Let's take 2 empty lots that haven't been developed and we'll call them both infill lots.
Mm-hmm.
One is next to Jamie's house in Carriage Hill. The other is on James Boulevard somewhere, okay? In my opinion, James Boulevard is not within a subdivision. I mean, though technically at one time, every lot in Signal Mountain was subdivided. So, you know, technically it could be a subdivision, but I don't consider James Boulevard to be a subdivision. I do consider Carriage Hill to be a subdivision. I think that this language regarding infill lot was meant to apply in a subdivision where every other house, when it was developed with a certain setback. And if you had the lot next to Jamie that didn't have to have that same setback that every other house had, then it would not be consistent within the subdivision. And I think the goal here was to create consistency within a subdivision. But on James Boulevard, houses may have been built all through the different years. There may have been different setbacks during the years. And so we're not trying to create consistency on James Boulevard because it never had that subdivision consistency. So I think that this double asterisk only really was meant to apply within a subdivision or a minor subdivision within a subdivision. So when it talks about the same shall apply for a single infill lot, I think that was intended to apply to a single infill lot within a subdivision, not just any infill lot anywhere in Signal Mountain. So
Charlie, when you're saying subdivision, you do mean major subdivision, right? Something
Right.
with an established
Major or minor, right?
right. I mean, yeah. So you have a major subdivision like Carriage Hill or a minor subdivision within Carriage Hill that branches off of it. That single infill lot is supposed to, in my opinion, would apply in that scenario, but would not apply in a scenario where we're on Timberlinks or James Boulevard or, you know, some road that isn't traditionally within a subdivision. So,
Charlie, can I ask a question then? So I understand your clarity. Thank you. But if you got an infield lot and it's off of James, I thought we had a minimum setback of 50 feet in an infield lot or 40 feet or whatever, but there is still that minimum setback that is for that infield lot, correct? Whether inside a subdivision or, okay. All right.
it would apply. I think what would happen is say the front setback when Carriage Hill was developed was 30 feet and now it's 40 feet. So I think that you
Now's the
want
most
to have
common.
that single infill lot have to be compliant with the 40-foot setback now when every other house
Right.
is built within a 30-foot setback. But on James Boulevard, you might have had a house built when it was 30 feet setback or a 40-foot setback or a 50-foot setback or whatever. And so they just have to comply with whatever the law is now when they build on, you know, outside of a subdivision. But I think within a subdivision, that's where you're looking for that consistency because these are built as a plan. So anyway,
Jamie?
Jeanette and Missy are on the call and they can provide their,
Okay.
I don't know if it's the same as mine, but maybe it will be.
No,
Well,
like I said, I just wanted some clarity on it because it seems like this is, you know, I'm going down the rabbit hole of the secondary questionings concerning, but it seemed like from a staff perspective, it was appropriate. So Jamie, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I'll start off. I think I'm going to start off by saying I think I disagree with Charlie. And here's how I'll phrase it to see whether or not that's the case or not. So the way that you would read the asterisk statement could be written to say for minor subdivisions being developed within an existing subdivision and for single infill lots, the developer shall use the most frequently occurring front setback. We didn't need a second sentence in your interpretation.
Well, as long as that, I mean, I think to clarify this, you would say the same shall apply for a single infill lot within a minor subdivision or major
So
subdivision.
you would further qualify the single infill lot.
Yeah.
So is there a then lack of definition for what would be the James lot in this table?
No, because it has to comply with the setback that's in existence at the time it's being built.
If it's in a named subdivision.
If it's outside of a subdivision.
If it's an infield lot, not in a subdivision, there's still a minimum setback threshold that it has to adhere to.
And what is that threshold in this table?
It's
I thought it was 50 feet. That's not in a subdivision. Boyd, is it 40 or 50?
40.
40, thank you.
yeah, I mean,
40 feet for
this
any
is,
lot not in a subdivision?
yeah.
That's
I mean,
correct.
if you look at this, it really kind of,
Where
Yeah.
is that setback mentioned?
yeah, well, what I'm going to say is that further kind of goes to my point is that this whole chart here is for subdivisions. It's for conservation subdivisions, conventional subdivisions, minor subdivisions.
Do you want clarity on infield lots not affiliated with subdivisions?
Well, I think an infill lot not affiliated with a subdivision would just apply whatever the existing.
It's just a lot. It's an infield lot.
Right.
I think we did a control F on this, Garrett. The only time infill, the reason this is a question, the only time infill is stated is in this sentence currently in our right.
Right. There's one other section. I can't remember what zone it's in, but it's definitely residential. But it's the same. It's the same double asterisk though. Same language. And can I just clarify something while I have, I guess, kind of the floor? When you're saying subdivision or subdivision, do you mean like a residential neighborhood subdivision? Because that's kind of what I'm getting out of the conversation. Is there subdivision as in the division of the legal division of lots, and then there's subdivisions as in like a neighborhood subdivision like Carriage Park.
Yeah, that's how I interpret a subdivision to be, like Carriage
I think we got
Hill.
more than three, and I don't want to get down to what the definition of subdivision is, but yeah, Charlie, I think your point is irregardless of whether subdivision, minor, major, if not in those established footprints, you must abide by the town of Signal Mountain guidelines of it meeting at least 40 feet setback, right?
Right.
Okay.
But if you're building within a subdivision like Carriage Hill, a neighborhood, or whatever you want to call it, then you would use the most commonly occurring setback within that subdivision.
Yeah, I just measured a lot in Carriage Hill on GIS, and both of the houses are 70 feet off the street. So that would be a time where the 40 would be pretty advantageous to the purchaser. Infill is in here twice. It's in the table in question, 6030202. And that's underneath height density and area regulations. And then it's also under the heights, height density and area.
What section is that?
Is repeated, 61403, amended in 99 and 2013, the same time this other language was. Like Garrett said, it just restates the same table. It's also misspelled, and it also changes the minimum lot size in square foot. That's not right. Am I reading that wrong, Garrett?
Section 614.
Yeah, 61403. It's PDF page 69. It's also page 69 in the document of April 2018. That table is needing some revision. That's not an agenda item, but maybe you can just do that one real quick.
Sure.
Sure.
So, yes, I can do that.
And I don't mean to ask Garrett to do anything that I didn't first query the group for.
So I guess
we can discuss that as well. But yeah. So the issue that I saw, it seemed, especially, okay. So let's put it this way, and we always have to think about context, and we have to think about, the unforeseen bad. It seemed like there was a variance requested, which is appropriate to go to BZA, was denied, which defaults back to what the current regulations are. If you can't get a variance for the subdivision ordinance, then you have to abide by the ordinance. And if the ordinance states, like you said, they thought that there was an advantage there to have an interpretation of this language, and it ended up with a 1 foot benefit. And it's likely the decision, had it been a minor or major subdivision, it's likely the layout that we would have best suited for the property anyway. Now we have to come up procedurally with the language of how to get there.
I mean, technically, the way it was interpreted by Boyd and Harry, these folks could have gone to Boyd first and said, hey, under this section 6030202, you need to tell me what the setback is, because it's not the normal setback. It's going to be whatever the most frequently occurring on the street is. And then Boyd could have said, okay, it's 39 feet. And then they could have gone to BZA and said, well, I want a variance of the 39-foot setback.
But they wouldn't need a variance if the ordinance already gives them 39 feet.
They wanted
would build
more.
39.
They wanted more of a variance.
And so it's appropriate to ask for it. And if it's denied, then you have to build the 39.
Or appeal.
Or go through an appeal process.
Yeah, there's an appeal process through the BZA.
So Charlie, are you saying there may need to be some type of clarification in there that if not minimum or if not in some type of subdivision, whether minimum or normal, which the truth of the matter is when we look at the majority of lots on Signal today, outside of maybe a street in Carriage Hill, most everything is probably an infield lot to be looked at. Even if you look at those lots that were built right across from Town Hall, those were you constituted as infield lots, that
Right.
that there would be a norm of adherence to the 40 feet. Is that correct? Is that one of the things you're asking for clarity?
Yeah, well, I think what I'm trying to clarify is that this sentence that says the same shall apply to an infill lot is meant to apply only in a subdivision such as Carriage Hill or that one next to Thrasher that was just done, or Wild Ridge subdivision. And so maybe we need to define what subdivision is, but we also need to add a sentence or add an ending to that sentence that says, this is my opinion, by the way, that we should say, you know, the same shall apply to an infill lot within a major or minor subdivision, rather than
Yeah.
just saying it's open to any infill lot anywhere in Signal Mountain.
I think that still leaves a void, and I'm fine with that. We can clarify that you have an infill lot within a subdivision in case that wasn't clear enough, which it may be because it's in your interpretation. But we still would need to define what those additional non-developed, non-subdivision residing lots are throughout the rest of Signal Mountain.
Right,
would
I
be.
agree. Because the 600 section is for subdivisions, not for, you know.
But I think we already have that resolution though, Jamie, to your point, and we're not on the BZA, but it's at least 40 feet to start with, right?
I think it depends. I mean,
Please.
Charlie and I have opposing interpretations of what that sentence means. I personally feel like, and this may be a good time to bring the guest in to discuss what their intent was, but I interpret this to mean, you know, we added language to include conservation subdivisions. We have conventional subdivisions, and presumably that would be for new proposed conventional subdivisions. If there were a subdivision approved early that did not have, for your example, we keep using the neighborhood, Carriage Hill. In the case where Carriage Hill is a conventional subdivision and has additional minor additions connected to it, I don't know if those are actually in the minor definition or not, Garrett. They probably aren't. I think the count's too high. So you've got conventional expansion within a conventional. We do have language for that. We added minor subdivision, which is a designation for like kind of the scrutiny under which they're approved and the process under which they're approved, either by staff or our committee. And then it seemed to me that they included, okay, under minors, you can do, it's the same street frontage, 100 feet, front setback 40 feet, same side setback, same rear setback. You have a smaller minimum lot size. You have the same lot coverage requirements or maximums. And then they claim, oh yeah, for other infill lots, the same shall apply, is how I interpret that to mean, so that we kind of have a uniform placement of regulation for spatial requirements for development on anything that hasn't been developed yet in town. And giving the ability to be the most occurring front setback on the street, I believe is the most desirable thing that we would do from a staff perspective, not having to have a variance to ensure that, you know, staff's in control of having someone come in and try and throw something right up on the edge of the street. But I mean, I can go where you're at, Charlie. I think we'll just have to add another row onto the table for a definition of what is a not yet developed lot that isn't in a subdivision. And it's probably I would contend, I would keep the same language that developers shall use the most frequently occurring front setback on the street. And when he wants to know what that is, when it's going through review in Boyd's office, they'll go and look at all the setbacks on the street and make sure that that's where they go. Because frankly, if they're all 10, you want that one to be 10. If they're all 70, you don't want to put him at 40.
Well, I think Garrett gave us an example that kind of shows the problem there. In a later email he sent us, he showed us that on one particular street in Old Town, the front setbacks are all over the place. So, you know, there's no, it's not going to really do anything if you're taking all these different setbacks that are all over the place and creating an average or a most frequent. I mean, if there's 20 houses and the most you have is 5 of them that are the same, you're just not going to get the consistency that you're looking for. And I think that there is no necessary consistency in that situation because the street wasn't built like a subdivision where they wanted consistency within all these lots. I mean, I've got an empty lot across the street from me, and I don't think that we're supposed to go and decide what the average lot size setback on Brady Point Road is to decide what that lot's setback is going to be. I think you just go and say, what's the front setback requirement in Signal Mountain right now? It's 40 feet. Okay, well, that setback's going to be 40 feet. I don't think that there's I don't think there's a need for the town manager to average out or determine the most frequently occurring setback. If you disagree with me, Jamie, that is fine, but that's just my opinion.
Well, let's before we get too far off in determination, how about Garrett, if you'll run your example, let me propose to ask Garrett, if you'll run your other example where you had a much wider variance so that everyone has a chance to see that information. Let's give the other public previous officials a chance to speak and give us all the same information, and then we'll try and get closer to determination.
You want me to go ahead and, I'm sorry, Jamie, do you want me to go ahead and bring in Miss Allen, Miss Cantrell?
I'm not opposed to that. They can see what we're discussing with Garrett. That's fine.
Okay, I'll bring them in.
Is everyone else okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah, do it.
All right, thank you.
You're talking about from the email, is that correct?
Yeah, if you want to run that example, that way we're still in information mining mode, and then we can get closer to proposal and then determination mode.
Sure. Give me a second to pull it up.
Welcome, Miss Annette, Miss Melissa. We're getting some information from Garrett, and then we'll hopefully get some information from you guys about the intent and the way the language was written, and then we'll hopefully circle up with eventually a decision about how to move forward.
Okay.
I'd like Harry's opinion on this first, if you can chime in. So essentially, this was a staff-approved plat that was sent in by a surveyor, but my question is if it's public information at this point or not. Could you answer that, Harry? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, this hasn't been recorded?
Correct.
Where's it at?
But you have forwarded it to members of the Planning Commission. So I guess it's already out there.
Correct, and Boyd has it as well. It just hasn't been signed by the Planning Commission nor recorded. So technically, and I'm under the assumption that it's still the property of the surveyor.
If you, Garrett, if you just want to tell us.
Why don't, yeah.
You just give a generic.
Just describe it.
Gotcha. Let me try to do it a different way then. Sorry, bear with me.
You want to show Gizmo and just look at it?
Yeah.
Look at it that way.
Right, I'm trying to pull it up by the tax number, and
I got it. If you want
I'll try to draw it as best as I can, if that's allowed. Let's see.
Got, depending on which way you're measuring, you got.
All right. Okay, you got it pulled up. It's a No, it's 405.
Well, I wasn't trying to use the actual one.
Oh, sorry. It's not 405.
Yeah. Well, that's another example here. Yeah, so let's see, where do we have anything that's, well, that's not really vacant, but it might get subdivided. Do we have anything vacant that's an example? Here's a old town example. Do they have 100 feet? No, they do not. So that wouldn't fit, would it?
Right. So the question still leaves, how far up the road do you go to get the most frequent setback?
If I can give my opinion for a second here, the performance standards in a zoning ordinance are supposed to be the minimum requirements, right? So if someone were to interpret that and someone was less than, say, 40 feet, that's when the interpretation happens. Why does the interpretation happen if it's over 40 feet? Right there in the ordinance, that's the minimum performance standard. Am I hearing that we're implying that there's a setback further than that in the lots? Because it's stated there, I think pretty black and white, that the minimum setback is 40 feet. Where can it be interpreted that the setback is further?
But if the most frequent is 60 feet, then you've got to remain some type of alignment to average at 60. You need your home at 60.
I hear you loud and clear. I just read the ordinance and look at the chart there, and it says nothing about if those are minimum standards. I would interpret it that that's only a way to reduce the minimum standard, not increase it. I mean, if I were to buy this lot here and everybody is set back 70 feet adjacent to me, that doesn't mean, that ordinance doesn't read to me right now that my setback is more than 40 feet. I don't think I've seen an ordinance that would do that, unless it had an overlay standard of a certain road or something else.
Well, it says that if you're in a minor subdivision developed within an existing subdivision, the developer shall use the most frequently occurring front setback on the street. So if it is 70 feet,
you've got to be at 70.
They couldn't build closer than 70 feet to the road.
Right, Charlie, but what if the subdivision, I mean, the subdivision in there probably has, a recorded subdivision has a setback line drawn on it that's 40 feet. So if that subdivision was developed with 40 feet, why couldn't someone subdivide with that occurring setback that's on the plat, regardless of where somebody chooses to build their home? I mean, there's all over the mountain, people deal with septic and other issues and reasons why they position a home where it is because of topographic requirements. I just don't see how that's beyond a minimum requirement, you know, that it's not stated there as 40 feet.
I'm not sure I follow that, and I'm sorry about that, but I think that the way I look at this, these are minimum setbacks. So if you can't build closer. I mean, if you look at this chart and it has front setback is 40 feet, you can't build a house that's 30 feet from the road. It has to be at least 40 feet. And like we were saying, if you're in a subdivision and you're using the most frequently occurring setback, then the developer, and it's 60 feet, for example, then the developer could not build a home that's closer to the road than 60 feet because they are required to use the most frequently occurring setback as the setback requirement for that lot that they're building on.
So again, if let's say there's a recorded major subdivision, we'll use Carriage Hill again. Okay? And the recorded plat says it's a 40-foot setback on it. And your two neighbors decided that they were going to build back 60 feet for one reason or another. The home laid out better. And your recorded subdivision shows a 40-foot setback, and you decide because you have a lot that's 4 acres, you're going to subdivide it. You're not sticking to a 40-foot setback. That's the same as the recorded plat on the subdivision, the major subdivision that you're adjacent to. That doesn't make sense to me. That's where I'm struggling with. I mean, it's a way to go to ask for more beyond the minimum. The performance minimum in the ordinance is 40 feet. Does that make sense? I mean, I live in Dogwood Grove, right? It's a subdivision that it really doesn't. Everybody has a 40-foot setback, but the lots are smaller than an acre in it too. So it really kind of doesn't make sense to all of them.
Where's Dogwood?
That's right across from Nolan Elementary.
Oh, yeah.
Off Shackleford Ridge. So if someone, there's only a few lots left in here, but if someone were to connect, adjacent, if we approved a subdivision surrounding it or connecting to it or whatever that happens in the future, but if somebody's not developed on one of the lots next to us, and myself and my neighbor down the street choose to build a house, even though the recorded plat shows a 40-foot setback, I don't think, for one reason or another, like for instance, the lot in the back there is set back a lot further for topo reasons or what have you. And then you go 2 lots down or 3 lots down, it's undeveloped. Another setback is 40 feet, 70 feet because of the weird shape of the lot. I just think it's impossible to interpret that in an established subdivision that you create a minor subdivision next. Then you stick with the performance standard of 40. I just think that unless it's below that minimum, so everybody in here is 20 feet or whatever it is. For some reason, we're grandfathered in, we're in Old Town. Everybody on your street is 20 feet, has a 20-foot setback. I would think that that's just my interpretation of why you would use that. If it's below that performance standard of 40 feet. How would you, so let me just, from a landowner perspective, you buy a lot somewhere over here. Your 2 neighbors there's major subdivisions next to you. Another good example is Boulder Point. Going down to Boulder Point, those homes are all over the place. If they decided to, or if they left a big lot in there, they did do a phase 2 later, but if they decided they were going to make a major subdivision somewhere else or a minor subdivision, splitting some of those large lots, those setbacks are all over the place. So you would enforce someone that just has an acre lot in there that they have to set back 80 feet. It just doesn't. I'm just thinking of scenarios that if there were to be an interpretation like that, it'd be.
Here's a nice consistent one.
Yeah, that's Boulder Point, right? So, and if you go to the plat, it probably shows a 40-foot setback when they made the majors, and that's what governs. And if somebody goes next to that subdivision or fills into that subdivision, then stick with the 40 feet. That's the minimum performance standard.
Okay. Let's hold on to that. Ryan, Garrett, did you? We didn't really draw much more conclusion. Maybe we can just use this one right here as a decent example of what might you do if one of these were. Well, see, that's still not the example, Charlie, that you're talking about, because this is major subdivision, right? So
right. I mean, in that major subdivision, if one of those lots was still empty right now and somebody wanted to go develop on it, then they would look at this chart and they would say, you know, that it's an infill lot within a subdivision and that they would have to use a setback that was the most frequently occurring front setback on the street.
Yeah, that kind of feeds Ryan's point pretty well that 40 foot's pretty advantageous when everybody else on the street's at a minimum of 66.
I mean, if everybody else is at a minimum of 66, then then it's going to be 66. The developer can't build closer than 66 feet.
Which would match the neighborhood more closely.
Right. I mean, that's how this language reads right now.
Okay. Well, can we, is there any more information mining, or do we want to go ahead and let our guest introduce their review of the language as it was written originally?
Yeah, let's hear from them.
Yeah, please.
Melissa, do you want to kick it off, or Annette?
Is Annette here? I don't see her up here. Can you hear me?
Hear you.
No, okay. Hey, Annette. You want to go first?
I don't mind going first. Missy called me and told me that we had been invited to come to this meeting tonight about this decision that was made many years ago. And I can tell you when I looked at that table again and at that language, I knew right away that it was vague, and we had not given it enough time and discussion and definition. What I remember about this discussion, the little I do remember, was my brain just went to Old Town and the thought and a discussion about small lots that couldn't meet the current setbacks. And so at that point, a developer, a builder would use the most frequently occurring setback on the street. Today I reached out to Van Bunch, who also served on the Planning Commission with us at the time. And I didn't mention my interpretation. He said, oh, we did that for Old Town. So, you know, it's clearly unclear. I've been following your discussion, and I can see how it makes no sense to, in some cases, it would be advantageous to the neighbors to not have a house 20 feet in front of them, closer to the street. But that's very prescriptive. And I do not remember ever having a conversation that, at least not a robust conversation, that talked about scenarios like that.
Want me to go? I tend, and this is where intent gets really tough, because I can look at you and say a word and you're going to go, oh, I understand what you're saying. And intent is real tough to figure out. I intended it, in my mind, looking over it the way Charlie has it. And I wouldn't have been in favor of doing anything that would complicate issues. I know that in Old Town, we had decided to do this calculation for small lots for record, so that if you had a smaller lot that had been sitting out there on record, they could reduce setbacks a little bit. Generally speaking, the houses around them would be the same way. I thought that that everything under that asterisk was applying to a subdivision, because I thought the small lot of record kind of took care of the other part, not maybe as elegantly as it should. But when I was, first of all, I've been listening to this whole thing. People have been using most frequently occurring and average interchangeably. Can't do that. they're two different things. So when y'all go to discuss that kind of thing, just remember that. The big thing I've got is that I never thought that it would mean that all vacant lots that were not in subdivisions in town would have fluid setbacks. And I was thinking in terms of, for instance, somebody does come in and wants a variance. The BZA is looking at 40 feet. That's what generally it is. But are we going to have staff or somebody go through, measure a bunch of houses, and go, okay, this is actually what it is. So instead of 12 feet, you're asking for 8.5. Or, yeah, it seems to me that it complicates things. If I were queen, I would take that second sentence out of it. And I looked at the definition of infill lot that was proposed, and it's land that is largely vacant and underdeveloped within areas that are largely developed. And I'm sitting there going, and largely is largely subjective. I mean, I don't get that language at all. So whatever y'all do, I hope you kind of tighten it up so that it doesn't, I have a whole list of problems, and I'm not going into them, that I think it could cause if it's interpreted the way it was recently. But just be careful, because like I said, the BZA was just one. Who is going to go through and figure out what the true setbacks are for each street? And if the street's 3 miles long, you know, that's kind of a heavy lift. That's it.
So you think that the definition of how you would go about, you'd expand the language by what that asterisk statement meant for infill lot, by like placing like adjacent houses instead of most frequently occurring on the street.
No, if I were just going to do it down and dirty, I'd pull that second sentence out of there and not define an infill lot. It's just have it a single lot. Because infill, I think, is, there's never, I've looked and I can't find a great definition for infill. I don't think what we've got proposed here is a really good definition either, because I think it is subjective. So yeah, single lot works as well as infill, but bearing in mind that places like Carriage Hill, and I think they've still got active covenants, and I think, don't quote me, that their covenants have setbacks in them. So you wouldn't want to go in there, and that's how I interpreted it. You wouldn't want to go in there and go, we're going to do this minor subdivision, if it were even possible, and have different setbacks. Because what was it, 78 was when we developed setbacks. Is that right, Annette, when we adopted them? In Signal Mountain.
The first ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, sometime in the 70s.
Right.
Yeah.
Because like my house was built in the 80s, and the lot size changed and probably the setbacks. So the builder of my house had to follow what had been brought in. Does that make sense? No.
Yeah, it's really hard to write language today that's going to be easily interpreted and applicable 30 years in the future based on the geometry of development around you.
You're going to have to keep changing. It's a work in progress. There's mistakes. I mean, there's always mistakes. There are things you look at and you go, oh, that could have been written a little bit better. You know,
we can just take it out and say, we'll let Chuck figure out the front setback on any lot anywhere within town limits.
Well, I think that's the planning commission. I mean, that's why you guys get paid the big bucks.
Yeah, big bucks to defer it down to Chuck.
Yeah.
And Boyd. Okay, very good. So what I heard from that was that Missy's interpretation, I'm sorry, not Missy, Melissa's interpretation is similar to Charlie's. Annette's interpretation, I think, is more similar to mine. I think I heard both of y'all state, though, however, that lots such as those in Old Town are not very well defined at the moment and possibly could be to prevent this from being a conflict in the future. Am I saying that correctly?
Mhm.
I don't know. Probably you're saying it correctly for your intention. I
My
don't
intention is
know.
for this meeting to be over as soon as possible.
I like that. I don't know why you would. Going back to that minor subdivision and talking about the most frequently used setbacks, I don't know why that is even there. I don't remember a conversation justifying that. So that's a separate discussion. For infill, I really thought it had to do with lots that, and Missy's memory's better than mine, so I don't remember the lot of record. I remember what a lot of record is, but I don't remember that there being a specific formula. So I thought that our intention for this language was to come up with a front setback for those lots of records that could not meet the current required front setback.
Yeah, the current, there's one small lot of record reference in 813-0306 under, well, that can't be right. That can't be right. 817. Oh, it's just got a weird subdivision. Okay, 817. Setbacks for small lots of record. If a lot of record is smaller than the current minimum lot size in the district, the ratio of the lot size in square feet to the minimum lot size in square feet shall be determined. By who and to what? The same ratio will be used to determine the setbacks for the small lot of record. So the percentage interpolation of the square foot minimum requirement is then applied to the setbacks, presumably in the outward direction because you have less space to develop from.
Mhm.
That's why I don't remember it. It requires math.
Yeah, that looks mathy. And
it has came up a couple of times.
And who has interpreted those ratios in the past, Garrett?
That was me. I was the one that calculated it from that section 817 and put it in my review for the BZA's consideration.
Oh,
and it was typically Chuck that brought it up to me.
So are small lots of records only approved through a BZA variance request?
No.
Why did it come through? What was the issue with BZA?
It was a small lot of record, and they were wanting to either build into the setback or the existing setback, and they were applying for a variance. And so I had to calculate what was allowed under section 817 for the BZA's consideration.
So you did interpret regulations from the language for them to be able to develop from, and that wasn't acceptable with the intended development that they had planned.
Correct.
Okay.
And we have had small lots of record come up, and staff does those calculations, and at times we'll have planning staff review them occasionally, but those are done as they come up. They're done in-house, and calculations made, and they're provided with the required setback.
So more frequently, small lots of record are able to be developed with the interpretation from this language?
The language that's subject of tonight's discussion?
No.
I'm sorry. I may be diverting too much, but Annette, I do have an intent to eventually circle back to what subdivision and lot types are. Have you been able to interpret based on the ordinance a developable area on a small lot of record and that lot be developed without requiring a variance be applied for?
Yes.
Okay.
So to make sure I understand this, let's say a small lot is 30,000 square feet. Let's just say that instead of an acre, it's 40,000 square feet. It's a normal lot, right? So that front setback, it's kind of easy math, right? If it's 3/4 and it's 40 feet, that would be a 30-foot front setback. Is that how that would be interpreted?
Yes.
Okay. So that
Okay.
addresses some of the concern for the creation of the infill, which was a small lot. Right, to reduce the setbacks that is.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
This is a question for the former planning commission members there. It sounded like the intent of that was to be able to reduce the setback, the infill lot, back to infill lot, was to reduce the setback for these smaller or undeveloped lots in Old Town.
I don't think that was an intent. I don't think
Okay.
the intent was to reduce the setbacks for anyone. The way I remember it is that maybe we didn't know about 817 and small lot of record, or that happened later. I don't know if you think that might be a possibility, Missy, but, and that's because I don't remember a conversation regarding, you know, the other scenarios where you have a large enough lot to have a 40-foot setback, but you're not going to make people, or you're going to make people have a larger setback because that's the most frequently occurring. We never had that conversation or considered that possibility or thought it would be beneficial to anybody. So that's the only reason I'm thinking, well, we just, the 817 wasn't there yet, or we weren't there yet, or we didn't know about it. And we were just very naive in writing that little sentence.
I kind of think that the 600 section that we were talking about, you know, we were adding conservation subdivision regulations. And I think we were just basically taking a forward-looking approach to subdivisions. You know, I mean, a conventional somebody's going to come in the future and say, I'd like to, you know, create this subdivision on this big parcel of land I have, and they can do it as a conservation subdivision or a conventional subdivision. Or if there's an existing subdivision and they're creating a minor subdivision within that. So I'm not sure we were looking at, I don't think we were really looking at infill lots, empty lots, you know, sprinkled about Signal Mountain. I don't think that was our intent with that section. And maybe we, you know, have the mention of infill lots for future subdivisions that aren't, you know, those lots aren't developed until long in the future after everything else in the subdivision is developed.
Well, I think the good news is that you have the opportunity to make it better and
Right.
make it say what it should, you think it should say, and that will benefit the community.
Yeah.
And add clarity to everyone's life.
Yay.
Yeah.
For the less than 0.5% of developable LDR area left in Signal
Mhm.
Mountain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe we take this and mull it over for the next meeting. So we, you know, we've had a lot to think about. What do you think, Jamie?
Would anybody be open to a workshop prior to the next planning commission meeting?
You know, that's always my pick.
That way we
we're
can
gonna
have
talk
a
about-
discussion leading up to potential action.
Yeah, we were going to talk about that here in a second. Anyway, so I always think we should spend time really digging in all the records, cross-referencing, and making sure we're not eliminating one term from one document or adding one that isn't properly represented in all of the other relevant documents.
And do I read this whole discussion accurately, that we're really dealing with two issues? One, what is currently written and what does it mean? What currently exists? And I guess to Annette's point, and what do we think it should read? Are we proposing changes or just clarification? So it seems to me that there's like at least 2 layers of questions that are on the table here.
I did like Melissa's comment of removing the second sentence. That definitely was discussed with the planning staff in our office. And if we're going to do that, it would almost be worth just revising this whole double asterisk section as to how the planning commission currently interprets this language. And that might be what we need to talk about at the workshop. Just a sheer rewrite of what do we mean and how do we want it to read from here on out. That way it just gives everybody a base understanding.
Yeah, and we could create a section that deals specifically with vacant lots, I guess.
Sure. I mean, I asked other planners in my office, and they said that the infill lot isn't really used that much across our 10 county region. So it just to put that out there.
What's used as an alternative?
Just the first sentence, really, just that the developer, in some form, the developer shall use the most frequently occurring setback. It's that language in some format, which I could take a couple of examples of and bring them to the meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think, Garrett, if you could, sorry to jump in, but maybe you can, take some examples to consider what would work, like an example of an empty lot on Timberlinks or James Boulevard, or an empty lot in Old Town somewhere randomly.
We could get fancy and do some overlay districts, man.
I mean, and what I was thinking as well, I think it was maybe Ryan that might have mentioned it as well, or it might have been in Melissa's comment. It's been a long meeting with a lot of discussion. It's to say, or we could define infill lot to only apply to having averaged or most frequently occurring setbacks, whichever we decide, to lots that are either lots of records or can't or do not have a buildable area with the given setbacks, making an infill lot specific enough to where it only applies to certain things if we want to go that route.
I think you're freestyling right now. I think
so.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's good. Well, that gives us an opportunity, Charlie being all merrily and such and jumping out there and his administrative fervor. Yeah, I think we can get to the interpretation fine. If we put on the blinders and we're only looking at this statement, we're like, we got to fix this statement. We can delete it, add more simple definitions, and if we need to specifically say Old Town, we can. I don't see a real problem with that. Generally, I like less specificity and just try and leave it open. And if that's what you were suggesting by eliminating the subdivision part and developer use most frequently occurring front setback, based on the recent question or inquiry about exactly how that would go, we might want to add a little length, or at least review the documents for a development submittal, make sure there's a review specifically for that, and maybe give some more guidance on how that's interpreted. I tend to like language like that. The ordinance says reference the submittal process. That way, that document that's a lot more easily updated as necessary, staff can revise that document and make sure that it's all tended to. We just want to make sure we don't overlap too much and require a potload of variances requests.
So just so Chanel and I have direction for next month, we're just focusing on this double asterisk section. Are we currently still considering minor and major subdivisions? Because these are the definitions from the subdivision regulations. I don't know if it makes sense to have them in both places.
And we've been pushing that off for so long. We got to get it finished. If we can actually get people together for a workshop, then I say we just tackle the mountain. I mean, how long's it been on the agenda? Like 8 months? We can't blame COVID forever.
Can a workshop be on the weekends?
It can be at your house in 15 minutes.
All right. Come on over.
I'm not opposed to the weekend.
Nobody else has raised their hand for that. Oh, there you go. Ryan's got his thumbs up.
All right, so we can tidy up. All great comments. Thank y'all both so much for participating and offering y'all's background and experience on the topic. I think that was very helpful. I think most everyone here would agree. So what I hear that we're doing is glazing over with the inclusion of the agenda item 3, the definitions, which included infill lot primarily and subsequent discussion. We have the preliminary final plat deadline. That language was put together. My initial review of that was fairly straightforward and clean. I like that was kind of split out.
Yes, this was the language from November. It just, I figured it needed to be split out, and because it is important and it does need to come sooner rather than later.
The schedule and then the requirements. So yeah, that's fine. And then Article 5 is subdivision regulation amendment. Set workshop date and time to discuss preliminary and final plat requirements. Before we kind of discuss that and bundle her up, do we have any other citizens in the waiting room waiting to address commission?
No, sir. We had no one requesting to speak.
Beautiful. All right. So Garrett, do you have a date far enough in the future that would make sense for us for April?
For a workshop?
Yes, sir.
I mean, we could have it literally an hour before the planning commission meeting. That's kind of what I would recommend, so that it's all fresh.
An hour before?
Or an hour and a half.
This meeting was an hour and 20 minutes.
That's what I'm saying. We could have this before the meeting.
And you feel like an hour is adequate? I don't know why I'm asking you questions. I don't think an hour is adequate.
Okay.
This is my opinion.
I prefer to do something on the weekend where we're talking about it fresh and not having to stick around for another meeting where we talk about it for another hour.
Yeah, and I like recording these things. I go back and watch them again and make the notes look a lot better because I stopped taking those a good little whiles back. So thank goodness for that. Too much in the chat, man.
When is the next regularly scheduled meeting?
That would be April 1st.
Fool's Day.
Right, we got Easter the week and after that. We got
What y'all's March 27th look like? Is that a thing for anybody?
I'm gone, but
You're gone.
yeah.
All right. We can always postpone and then have a session. And if it's not, well, if Boyd's all right with that, seems to be reasonable. I don't think we're disrupting anybody's business. The only caution would be is if something turns up that we needed to discuss, then we'd have to throw another date on the schedule. So April 3rd, what's that look like?
Good year.
Looks okay. Okay.
Garrett, you got anything?
Either Chanel or I should be available.
Mike, Harry, Boyd. Y'all are both talking into the ether.
That's fine with me.
Fine with me.
Okay. Y'all tell me what y'all want. I got a smoker. I'll make some. What's that?
How about morning?
That's fine. I mean, I live here,
9
so.
or 10 a.m., something like that.
Okay.
That would be my suggestion. $9 a.m.
Yeah, I was thinking about bringing lunch, but I can bring breakfast instead. All right, I got it written down. No objections. Did we adequately discuss and get ourselves prepared for the big workshop meeting and be able to blow this thing out?
Can I just ask to clarify, is this going to be in lieu or at least the April 1st meeting? Is that still going to occur? Is it going to be postponed? Is this in lieu of that?
Yeah, I'd like to be in lieu of it. We only have to meet 4 times a year, so I think we're good.
Just wanted to make sure.
If we promise to power through and get this language written and in place and off the agenda,
Yes.
that'll be your stocking stuffer.
Jamie, did you set on 9 o'clock or 10?
I wrote down 9.
Okay. Just needed to know for sure.
Okay. And we do have enough room to social distance in the main town hall meeting room.
Yeah, especially with it being a work session, we're not, as long as we broadcast it, we don't have to have public access to the meeting itself. So we can spread out in the floor space as opposed to having to use the dais.
Excellent. Mask to enter the building. Once you sit down and in your spot, you're good, right?
As long as we're spread out enough.
Okay. And if you're drinking 120 proof or greater, that counts as disinfectant.
9 o'clock's a mite early for that, but
y'all Saturdays mean different things than mine do. All right,
Might need it
excellent.
for this one.
Yeah, we might need it for this one. We'll bring a toast at the end. All right. Very good. Is there a motion to adjourn or any other business to discuss?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Very good. Thank y'all so much for continuing to participate. I feel like we're making good strides, headed in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got to end up somewhere. Thanks, guys.
Right.
thank you all.